First, though, it's been another exciting week in the world of education, with SATs tests being leaked online and confusion as to whether they'd even go ahead. And that's prompted one Leicestershire head teacher to write an open letter to his MP, who just happens to be Nicky Morgan, the Education Secretary. Troy Jenkinson told the Times Education Supplement he's angry at the lack of communication from the Department for Education and the amount of testing children face.
The tests are very high stakes, and that means that effectively if our school gets poor results, that could then have implications for us as a school. And the children realise that, the staff realise that, and that puts a lot of pressure on us.
Every question I did, I looked at the clock, because you think you're going to run out of time and not get through the whole paper. So then you panic, and I panic anyway. I sit and panic.
Fingers crossed there for Megan, and her reaction really, Heather Wheeler, is one that head teachers say that they're most concerned about. Do we really want all our 10-year-olds to be stressed out, and is this really the best preparation for their secondary school education?
It is the best preparation for their secondary school education, because we want kids to be able to get into secondary school who absolutely are confident in reading and writing and the other subjects that they've been studying. I do think that sometimes, I don't know where this is coming from, whether it's straightforward to do with the NUT or whatever, but, you know, why are we modelling Connolly kids? You know, they're there to learn and teachers are there to teach them. They ought to be proud that these kids are going to get really good results. And I hope Megan does get a good result.
Is making them panic, though, really mollycoddling them?
Why am I making them panic? They're meant to be confident children. They've been in school since they've been 4.5. Why are they panicking about taking an exam at 10?
Well, perhaps it is the test that's making them panic.
No, I think people are making way too much of this. It's really good that children know how good they are at a subject, because otherwise how do they know they need to improve?
John, mollycoddling them, they should just be used to this testing system.
I think the issue is how chaotic this has been. A few weeks ago we had the Key Stage 1 tests cancelled. Now the Key Stage 2 tests were, the answers were leaked online, I believe. The department has changed the guidelines for teachers 80-odd times. It's virtually every couple of days they've changed the guidelines for teachers. And this is in a context when education budgets are falling, there's chronic teacher shortages, class sizes are now increasing, and Nicky Morgan, until her U-turn the other day, has been obsessed with forced academisation. There is chaos in our education system at the moment, and that's the issue.
It sounds like a mess to a lot of teachers.
Well, the good thing is, clearly, we both agree that exams are the way forward, because dear John didn't say, let's scrap the exams. So that's great. We've dealt with that one, haven't we? Now, of course, it's not chaotic. What are you going to do when somebody is personally trying to upset the apple cart?
But it's the teachers who are describing it as chaotic.
Well, they would, wouldn't they?
Well, they only would if they think it is chaotic.
No, because what's going to happen? I need to know how good my schools are in my constituency. My parents write to me about it all the time. They are not happy with the quality of education in my schools.
And are none of the parents concerned about testing in your constituency?
One parent, has written to me. That's it.
But it's a shambles, though, isn't it? When the answers to the tests get leaked online,
and
the Key Stage 1 test.
Politically did that by any chance?
What are you saying? The Labour Party did it? Are you saying?
I don't know.
Where would we have got the answers? Nicky Morgan's got to get a grip of her department, because at the moment it is a complete mess.
Let me just tell you what the Department for Education has told us. It does apologise for the unacceptable errors in administration of primary tests, and they are investigating tests they say, as Heather is saying, are in the pupils' own interests and help the teachers in those schools understand how those pupils are performing. Just for the record, of course, Troy Jenkinson isn't actually anti-testing, which it doesn't sound like you are either.
No, I'm in favour of stretching children and testing children. I was tested at school as well. But my point is, this week, there's been utter chaos. A few weeks ago, there was chaos about the Key Stage 1 tests, and actually ministers should be getting a grip, because they're letting down pupils.
Well, Heather, how can you restore faith in this system when all of these things have gone wrong?
I agree with you. Interestingly, in the small amount of delving around that I've been able to do, there were 243 people that had access to that information. So it won't take long to find out who the mole is.
OK. Well, next is a large spoonful of cash, the right prescription for our struggling ambulance service. East Midlands Ambulance Service has taken a bruising in an official inspection which said safety levels for patients were inadequate. Making improvements could be difficult, though. The service says its funding for next year isn't enough to meet its targets. Here's Rob Pittam.
The East Midlands Ambulance Service has been struggling for several years. This week it was rated as needing improvement. A report found that staff were passionate and committed, but put simply, there isn't enough of them. It said response times were consistently below the national average. There was an unrelenting demand for emergency services, with a lack of staff and resources to meet the need. There have been repeated attempts to solve the problems with 3 different chief executives in 3 years.
Well, we are improving. We've already made some changes and we are getting better.
We are working very hard to get there, and we have seen some improvements this year.
For those patients that we've not been able to respond to in a timely manner or provide that level of service which they expect, then absolutely we have to apologise to those patients.
The ambulance service admits next year's budget of £152.5 million won't be enough to meet its new targets, and patients groups say more cash is a part of the answer.
The heart of it for us, as we can see from the report, is really a lack of resources, a lack of staff, a lack of ambulances.
Now there's movement from politicians too.
We've got to get progress, and so we're going to bring together the minister who's responsible for the ambulance service, the EMAS leadership as well, the CQC to explain to us their findings, and on a cross-party basis as many East Midlands MPs as we possibly can, so we can do a real show of strength.
But it's a complex problem. Delays handing over patients at hospitals are a major headache, and almost a third of emergency calls aren't actually emergencies. The region's clinical commissioning groups who fund the service say they've increased the budget for next year. They'll now be holding an independent review of the whole urgent care system to see where improvements can be made.
So Jonathan Ashworth, as you can see from that film you've just seen, this is just the latest in a long list of problems for EMAS, and it's certainly not the first time that we've spoken about it here in the studio with both of you. But how concerned should we be about this latest problem?
Yeah, of course we should be concerned. I think EMAS have said that they feel that they're under-resourced. If that's the case, we've got to look at it. I hope that the meeting which Robert, the MP from Newark, was talking about, Robert Jenrick, goes ahead, and I think his suggestion that we do it on a cross-party basis to lobby the ministers is a very sensible suggestion, because clearly we have an issue here with East Midlands Ambulance Service and we've got to resolve it. And if it is an issue of resource, I hope we can all combine to lobby ministers to get the resource we need.
Heather, the problem of delays in ambulances arriving is a particular problem in rural areas. This must be a big concern for your constituents.
It is a concern, and we're also very much cross-party indeed, cross-boundary. So sometimes we'll have a West Midlands ambulance or an East Midlands ambulance, depending on where you end up. But more important than that, it's well known the delays of dropping off at hospitals. Burton are trying very, very hard to get it down to 20 minutes or less, but it's really well known. The Leicester hospitals, 40 minutes you can wait there to discharge your patient before you can go off to another job. Well, that's absolutely no good whatsoever. So I'm really pleased about this inquiry, because it's an inquiry into everything. It's not just about how this particular ambulance service are run. It's the task that is an accident and emergency task.
And it looks like part of that answer is obviously going to be funding. They want more money, and they're heading for a £12 million deficit this year, and that's why they're not meeting these targets. And they've already said that next year's money isn't going to be enough either, so they're not going to meet those targets again.
I find that a little bit strange, because they were planning to take on 342 staff. They've taken 350, so that's more. Even by my maths, that's 8 more. But more than that, they've already been told they're actually going to get more money next year. So let's just see how this does pan out.
You're right, they have been told that they are going to get more money next year, but they've already said that money won't be enough, so they still won't meet those targets. We should, of course, say that CQC inspectors did find some outstanding practices within EMAS, so we should say that. But their report did say that management was inadequate, the problems of handing patients over, which you mentioned at hospitals, ambulances backing up outside, and not being able to get back on the road. Those are well documented, as Heather says.
Yes, we really do need it sorting out. So I hope we can get this meeting with the minister on a cross-party basis, and I hope we can really interrogate the suggestion that it's about resources. I'm worried that about the future of the NHS going forward has got to find billions and billions of pounds worth of efficiency savings. I hope those efficiency savings don't also hit the ambulance services further in the future as well. So, let's see where we get to when we've had the meeting with the minister, and hopefully we'll get some good answers from the minister.
Management actually was inadequate. No, management wasn't inadequate, it says. It requires improvement. Heather Wheeler, what do you think, with this meeting happening, the chances are of more funding being available?
I'm sure the minister will listen and will understand, but we must have this review, because, we know that the staff, the paramedics and the people on the telephones, they're really excellent. And we love them for the job that they do.
They're under a lot of pressure.
They are under a lot of pressure, and I've never had a complaint about somebody who's telephoned in and that they're abrasive with them or dismissive of my constituents. So, hats off to the staff, doing a grand job. But let's see where the problem is in the chain of events that goes on, because I don't think it's really to do with the ambulance service, because they've had new kit, they've had more staff. I think it's where they have these log jams where they're handing in at the hospitals and then coming back out again.
OK, let's talk about funding again, and it does get very complicated because the funding for the ambulance service does come from the regions, CCGs, the clinical commissioning groups. They could simply, in effect, give them more money, but that, of course, would mean it'd be taking money elsewhere that's desperately needed too, from elsewhere in the health service, for example, John.
Yeah, of course, which is why we've got to take it to ministers at a national level. And I hope if when we have our meeting with the minister, he doesn't sit there and go, well, it's all to do with the CCG, because that's clearly not going to be adequate in this circumstance. So no, yeah, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. We've got to be banging the drum saying that, we need the proper level of funding and resource. I take Heather's point that we've got to interrogate that argument from the ambulance service, but if it is about resources, we've really got to be banging the drum for it.
Of course, the MP for Newark, Robert Jenrick, also told us that parts of this problem are historical. It was Labour, he says, who introduced regional ambulance services in the first place.
This has been, this hasn't happened overnight, which is why I'm not trying to sort of, say it's all Heather's Tory government's fault. This has been going on for some time, but I think everyone is fed up of this now. We've got to get to grips with it and get it sorted out.
The one thing I do find most interesting is that there's no conversation with this report about joining up with West Midlands at all. And so recently, a few weeks ago, and the BBC broke the story about this supposed join-up between West Midlands Ambulance and East Midlands Ambulance. I know that there's going to be some cooperation and some management help.
That's been dismissed now by EMAS.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think that let's see how that runs as well.
OK, we will do. Thank you very much indeed. Now, a complex problem, and there's nothing clear-cut about the EU referendum either. This week, it was announced that there'll be a £1 billion loan for social housing. But is it a boost or a bribe? And a row broke out over an EU-funded redevelopment project, which critics said was being held back by Brussels red tape. Our political editor, Tony Roe, has been looking at the arguments.
These flats in an old mill at Radford in Nottingham are here because of European loans, social housing to rent.
It was just wonderful to move into my own space and have a place where I can have my grandson come and visit me and do all the granny things that I came to Nottingham to do.
Now the largest pot of money ever for social housing from the European Investment Bank is heading to the UK, £1 billion of cheap loans. In Nottingham, they'll be bidding for more. Hundreds of new homes are planned, which will bring jobs too.
The task is enormous. The country has not built enough homes over the last 20 to 30 years, desperately need more homes, and any form of cheap borrowings or low-cost loans that housing associations can secure over the long term is going to make a huge impact on that.
Vote Leave say this extra funding being made available is tantamount to the European Investment Bank bribing the electorate in the run-up to the referendum.
The negotiation for this has been going on for 18 months, which is actually, of course, before we even knew whether there was going to be a referendum, let alone the referendum date. We're constantly in contact with potential borrowers. Indeed, this is the second loan which we've made to the Housing Finance Corporation over the last few years. So it is absolutely, completely wrong to say that the timing of it has anything whatsoever to do with the referendum campaign.
Sneinton Market gets EU development money. Brexit campaigners say the Remain camp have an advantage. We can't film what they would do with money we'd save from not being in the European Union. And the UK could decide where to spend it without all the red tape.
Now, Sneinton Market has made national newspaper headlines this week, claims that it's virtually empty because units here are not allowed to use tills.
More balmy EU rules? Well, for 25 years, the old fruit and veg wholesale market in Nottingham has lurched from one scheme to another to try to regenerate the place. New EU funding doesn't cover all the site, so tills can be used in some parts. It is in the conditions, though, of the regeneration grant that the area where the revamped units aren't shops, but they don't want to be. The EU funding is for creative and artistic businesses.
This absolutely wouldn't have happened without European money. I mean, £2.44 million of European money has gone into this refurbishment, and that was matched by £1.45 million from Nottingham City Council. So 2/3 of the money came from Europe, and money for developments of this kind, is very difficult to secure from central government.
Ollie Wheatcroft is well on the way to moving in.
We think it's very attractive. We think there's a good atmosphere down here. Certainly once all the units are full, we think it'll be a very vibrant and fun place to work.
At Art of Football, they're already trading here online. No tills are needed. Original football art.
We've sold to over 50 different countries. This Leicester City story, just taking the world by storm. I think we sold 3 of the new Leicester designs to Japan yesterday.
More artistic tenants are moving in soon. But Vote Leave have said we would have to have regeneration projects like this outside the European Union. And we could probably have more sooner if we control our own investment money.
So, Heather Wheeler, boost or bribe? And I think I can probably guess your answer.
Of 2 words, clearly, bribe. Mainly because it won't be boost, it'll be bust. I mean, this is very, very interesting. Different councils, I appreciate we're talking about housing associations here, but of course they're going to bite people's hands off for cheaper loans. But their business model shouldn't be based on that. I do find this really quite concerning.
So you think it's a bribe, but Jonathan Taylor from the EIB says that the timing of this is coincidental. You might say he would say that, but we are in the middle of this short campaign, and isn't it better for the EIB to say exactly where they are on loans and spell it out to the voters, because voters want clarity right now?
Doesn't it tell you something about how Europe worked, that it's taken 18 months to get to this point? Seriously? And we've been short of housing? 18 months. That's typical Europe, sclerotic.
John Ashworth, the EIB has issued 2 statements on loans in Germany this year, 6 on France, 18 on British loans. Maybe it's an attempt to move away from Project Fear.
Well, I think it's a very good initiative and I would welcome this investment. And I think this shows another one of the advantages of staying within the EU. It is good for our economy. It's good for investment. It's good for trade. It's good for jobs. I think gambling with our economy in the way Heather wants to do is crazy for the finances of my constituents and indeed Heather's constituents in South Derbyshire.
Are you ready to gamble?
The daft thing is, how kind of them to give me my money back. And actually, what are they giving me? Oh, they're giving me 50% of my money back. I would rather keep the money, make the decisions here, make the decisions much, much faster.
Well, you
it's
say
a
that,
nonsense how slow this has been.
But you saw Cathy McArdle, who's in charge of the creative quarter in Nottingham in our film. She says that 2/3 of the money that have been invested there has come from the EU, and she says they just can't get hold of money from central government. So you can't blame them for going to the EIB to get that money, going cap in hand, if you like, because they can't get the money from central government.
Is giving $8 billion a year to Europe. If we didn't give $8 billion a year to Europe, we wouldn't only have 4.4 billion to play with, very graciously giving it back to us. It's our money. We should be deciding what to do with our money.
But your Tory Chancellor, George Osborne, the fellow who could be your next leader, the Governor of the Bank of England, who's come in and often backs up George Osborne, the OECD, lots of different international economics bodies have said leaving the EU will damage our economy. The pound plummeted in February when it was announced that Boris was going to campaign to leave the EU because there's so much insecurity around in the economy at the moment.
Coming out of the EU doesn't mean, of course, that we won't get any money from the European Investment Bank, because they have given money to countries like Norway, to Switzerland, Iceland and Liechtenstein.
Well, coming out of the EU means turning our backs on a market of 500 million people. I just think, why would we do that when there's so many businesses trade with the EU, so much, 50% of our exports go to the EU? Why are we putting all that at risk? Why do you want to throw the dice
Heather,
on that?
Why risk it all?
And of course,
if it's a risk.
Dear John just totally forgets how many German cars do we buy? How much French champagne do we buy? How much French brie do we buy? Are you seriously telling me they will not be desperate to sell to us?
But you don't know.
You don't know. Come on.
Why are you gambling?
I don't know how much French champagne you buy, Heather.
Why? And also, why are we going to make it more difficult for people from the EU, to come and work here? Are you going to make Claudio Ranieri apply for a work permit to come and work in Leicester and keep us at the top of the Premier League?
And tell me again how absolutely brilliantly the man from Everton has been playing. Oh yeah, he got sacked last night. Well done. That's a really great man.
Is that your team?
Away from the football, and we obviously know where your support lies, we could still deal with the European Investment Bank if we Brexit, but looking at the facts, it does seem, talking to them, that we might not get as much money from them if we do come out. So, I mean, in the last 8 years, for example, the UK has had £34 billion of money from the EIB. while less than 1 billion has actually gone to those non-EU countries. So we could get less, but we could still get something.
We could still get something. It's a matter of having pride in our country. I want our sovereignty back. I want us to be in charge of what we do. I mean, I've got 30 years of experience of economic regeneration projects. And when we heard about the market, the 3.whatever million from Europe and 1.3 million from national resources as well. I mean, that was a really strange thing. Where's the public? Where's the private money in that? Where are the private entrepreneurs who actually have got faith in what that development's going to do? All I heard there was something like £6 million of public money. Where's the private money?
So how's the campaigning going? On the campaign trail, in this short campaign?
The campaigning I think in Leicester it's going pretty well.
Is there much going on? I mean, we heard that there was a debate at Loughborough University, a public meeting in Lutterworth, and your battle buses around the
There was a battle bus in Leicester at De Montfort University on Wednesday of this week, and I was at an event on Friday, and when they asked me should we stay or remain, I said we should stay, and the whole room cheered.
Campaigning?
Yeah, absolutely. I have this bizarre thing in my life these days. I'm sticking up red posters.
Excellent.
Vote leave.
Good
Vote
for you.
leave.
Time now for a roundup of some of the other